Yo guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing a review. As you guys can see by the title, we've got some Daredevil to review. I've recently been getting into the Daredevil comics after watching the Netflix show and then getting caught up with Born Again. And I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed the character of Daredevil, and he's skyrocketed to becoming one of my favorite superheroes or just comic characters of all time. That being said, there are like three, I would say, quintessential Daredevil stories that most people should probably start off with reading, just so that you can get into the character. You could just start in like one of the main runs, but there are three kind of standalone iconic Daredevil stories that you can get on their own in trade, and read those and then get a pretty good feel for the character. And those, of course, are Daredevil, The Man Without Fear, Daredevil Born Again, and Daredevil Yellow. And so I'm going to be talking about my reviews of each of the three, what I like and dislike about them, and which ones I think are the best. There is one in here in particular that I really loved, and it's one of my favorite comics I've ever read. So, yeah, guys. That's what we're going to be doing today. If you guys do go on to enjoy, please be sure to leave a like, maybe subscribe if you haven't already, because I would greatly appreciate it. And without further ado, let's get into it. So the first thing, I'm going to review these, I guess, in order of like the timeline in which they take place within the Daredevil mythos. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about is The Man Without Fear. This is actually the second comic that I read. I actually read Daredevil Yellow first, which I guess chronologically is probably the last one you're supposed to read of these three stories. But I had no problem because having watched the show, there is some context, but if you're not familiar with the character and haven't seen the show or whatever, I would not recommend starting with Daredevil Yellow. I definitely would recommend starting with The Man Without Fear. Yeah, this is awesome. In a lot of ways, it takes, like a show, I'd say seasons 1 and 2, or parts of season 2, are ripped straight from this comic. Written by Frank Miller, with art by John Romita Jr. I know a lot of people give John Romita Jr. flack, but his art in this book was actually super sick. I really enjoyed the art in this. I thought it was awesome, and then Frank Miller's writing is usually pretty freaking fantastic too. But I just really like Daredevil's origin story. That's sort of what this is. It's Daredevil year 1, essentially. It talks about one of the elements that I really liked about Daredevil is his dad, and tying in with like the Irish mob in New York, and like the Irish boxing scene, which is something that I think is just kind of badass. As somebody who loves listening to some Irish punk rock like Dropkick Murphys or Flogging Molly or whatever, stuff like that kind of I think is interesting and is pretty cool. If you've ever seen the movie Snatch, yeah, stuff like that, it's pretty cool. Just that Irish gangster, also like Boondock Saints, stuff like that I dig. But yeah, this kind of has a similar feel, and expands more on Batlin Jack Murdoch more than the show does. It gives you more insight into what he was doing. I guess in the show it's more implied that he was more involved with the mob. It's not really shown or told very much, but here in the comic it talks more about what exactly he was doing for the mob and how involved he was, and the reasons behind why he got shot. Like it's implied in the show, but here you actually see how involved he was and what he was doing. So I thought that was pretty cool, and it ties in, Matt's first meeting with Elektra in the scene where she pulls up in the red car, and in the show I'm pretty sure it's like a Ferrari or something, but it shows her pulling up and they go on the joyride or whatever. So yeah, there's several scenes throughout this comic that I am aware of because of the show, and they're just ripped straight from this. And of course, Matt Murdock with his like black suit, not black suit, but like with his like the bandana covering his face or whatever, just like his prototype suit. Like, I wouldn't exactly call it prototype, because if anything, the yellow suit sort of the prototype suit, but just before he's actually Daredevil, just the suit that he's rocking to go out and enact vigilante justice. Yeah, just all of that stuff where he has like the black blindfold or whatever, it all comes from this comic, and we get to see him in action. We get stuff alluded to for later on with Stick, kind of referencing the war with the hand and all that. All of those ideas are introduced in this comic, and yeah, it was pretty dope. And I did want to show you guys one page that I absolutely love. Piece of art with Matt just standing right here. It's like, define aura, you know what I'm saying? Like, that is just badass. So yeah, Daredevil, the Man Without Fear, I thought it was fantastic start to finish. It's not long at all, and it just gives you like his backstory. Talks about Elektra, just introduces a lot of ideas and concepts for the overall Daredevil mythos. So I think this is sort of the quintessential starting place for Daredevil. Now moving on, I would say probably the second place would be Daredevil Born Again. So a little bit of a misconception I kind of had was I thought this was going to be very similar to the Born Again TV show, but actually it's not really at all. There are some elements that I could see from the Born Again show taking from this, but really this is most similar to season 3 of the show and not actually the Born Again show, despite them sharing the same name. I think the new show is called Born Again as more of a thematic reasoning, like because, you know, it was in basically, you know, development purgatory for so long. It was not necessarily canceled. Well, I guess the original Netflix show was canceled, and then the rewrites and all that. So it's as if the show was born again. Like it was resurrected from the dead, pretty much. That's the idea I have as to why it's called Born Again. And of course they have the source material, which there's like a reason why, but like, as far as adapting what's in this comic, this is just season 3, not the Born Again TV show. For the most part, there's a lot of ideas. Of course, basically this follows what happens when Matt Murdock's life is falling apart. Kingpin discovers who Matt Murdock is because Karen is a junkie. She goes off to pursue a film career, but ends up getting addicted to drugs, and then her film career becomes adult films, and her whole life just takes a negative turn, left turn, downward spiral, and she becomes a junkie and ends up selling Matt's secret identity, or Daredevil's secret identity, to get, you know, her next fix. And because of that, Matt's life just slowly starts to go wrong. He loses his career. He loses his whole livelihood. You know, his home is taken away from him. He gets in a lot of tax trouble, and it's all because Kingpin has connections that are just ruining Matt's life from literally every direction. And it starts off really awesome. It starts off as sort of a slow burn, and we can see the deterioration of Matt's mental state and his psyche and the sort of mindset he's in, and it sort of is contrasted with Foggy, Franklin Nelson, his best friend, who ends up, of course their practice gets taken down, but Franklin ends up becoming a big shot lawyer, gets like super rich, and we see that in season 3 of the show, just the contrast between their two lives once they split and they're not working together anymore. We see Matt's life like steadily get worse while Foggy's steadily gets better, and then we also see more about Karen and what she's dealing with, and the, you know, repercussions of her actions, and her having to be on the run, which I kind of liked. In the show, they played it off as sort of Karen's backstory of her being a junkie, and like, I think it was really well done in the show. And season 3 is one of my favorite seasons. I'd say seasons 3 and 1 are like right there for being the best. Season 3 might be the best season, I'm not sure. But it's a little bit different because in the show that's like her backstory, but here in the comic it's actually like in the present, like that's what's happening. But like you can still see the inspirations that they took from Born Again to create that backstory for Karen in the show. But then of course we see some iconic parts where you know, Matt gets kind of beat up, roughed up, almost killed, and he's sort of rehabilitating in the church, and then with Sister Maggie, all that stuff happens, which I really like that scene in the show. Like, I mean, I say that scene, it's basically the whole season. One thing that I think they took liberties with in the show is played around more with his faith and sort of a Matt losing his religion in his darkest hour kind of deal, and like turning away from Christ, turning away from God, because of course Christianity and Catholicism plays a heavy part in Daredevil's character, his mythos, his lore, just who he is as a character. His religion plays a heavy part, and I think that examination of it in the show was really well done and made it more interesting. And it's not really something that's discussed here in the comic, that he feels like in the show he feels like God has like turned away from him pretty much, and he's like you know, is losing himself, losing his religion. That doesn't really happen in the comics, or maybe it's implied and I just didn't get it, I don't know. But that's something I think the show kind of did better, maybe, in a sense, or just something I liked about the show that they didn't do in the comics. But yeah, everything in this is really great. I love seeing like him be so close to defeat and getting killed and just down on his luck, and then he starts his rehabilitation and finally ends up putting back on the suit, essentially, to step in. But one thing I think, this kind of fumbled in the end. Like the last couple of, or a few issues, they introduced this character called Nuke, who the Kingpin basically hires this super soldier. He's part of, well, one thing I do like is that they mentioned the Weapon X program, or the Weapons Plus program, rather, which of course Captain America was weapon number 1, and then Wolverine ends up being weapon number 10, Weapon X. So they introduce like this idea, or at least they reference it, and Nuke is one of the subjects or whatever. He's just like this insane Vietnam War vet that's like just off the hook and blowing stuff up. And then they introduce the Avengers into the story, and then Captain America plays a part. And to me, that's kind of when the story just lost itself. Like, it went from being this slow burn examination of Matt losing himself and his life deteriorating around him, to introducing the Avengers and all these like crazy conspiracy things. Like, well, I say crazy conspiracy things. Conspiracy is one of the most fascinating parts about Daredevil, is just all the corruption around him, but they just bump up the scale by introducing the Avengers and introducing Captain America and Duke, or not Duke, that's from G.I. Joe, but Nuke. I don't know, I just did not enjoy that part of the story. I think the stakes, like the stakes are supposed to get higher, but it's just blown out of proportion. I think Daredevil is most fun when he's a street tier hero, a vigilante, just straight up fighting gangsters, fighting serial killers, and fighting Fisk, and like uncovering all of this corruption in his city. But as soon as you start introducing more fantastical elements, like, you know, the Avengers, you know, Thor makes an appearance in this, like the God of Thunder, it kind of takes you out of the immersion and out of that mind space of it being a grounded street tier vigilante story, and then you're reminded that, oh yeah, this is Marvel, there's, you know, literal thunder gods rocking around New York City. You know, it kind of takes you out of the story and the overall dreary and like corrupt feel of it all. Like, it's very gritty and like street tier, you know what I mean? And it kind of takes you out of that, which I didn't like. I thought that last little arc with Nuke and Cap and all that was just super unnecessary, and I really am glad that that was not adapted in season 3 of the show. They took some liberties and kept up the pace with the show, and did not include that and gave us a different ending to the sort of Born Again story, which I thought worked out much better than it did in the comics. So while I still enjoyed the vast majority of it, I think as soon as they start introducing Nuke and Cap, it's basically a completely different story at that point. Yeah, I didn't really care for the ending, but everything before that is utterly fantastic. And lastly, the one I'm going to talk about and kind of rave about today is Daredevil Yellow, written by Jeff Loeb with art by Tim Sale. And I've got to say, this is one of the greatest comics I've ever read. Of course, I'm not the most well-versed in comics, as I've only gotten into comics and expanding my knowledge of creators and various works and different publishers and all that within the last year. I started collecting and reading comics summer of 24, when Deadpool and Wolverine came out in theaters. I saw it, and that sort of reignited my passion for comic book characters and what, brought me back into the fold, so to speak. So I don't have the most extensive catalog of comics that I've read, and so when I say that this is one of the best ones I've ever read, that might not be saying a whole lot to a whole lot of different people, but I truly feel that this is a masterpiece, and it was just amazing. So basically, in the timeline, I guess, the character of Karen Page ends up getting killed by Bullseye. The character Bullseye, I guess in the show Born Again, Bullseye, well, okay, I probably shouldn't say that for spoilers, and a lot of people haven't seen it. But Karen doesn't die in the show, but in the comics, Karen dies. She's killed by Bullseye, I'll say that. And of course that's Matt's love interest, been, his love interest since almost the very beginning of Daredevil, right? Basically, he's having a very tough time grieving, so Foggy tells him to write a letter to her. So this whole story is narrated by Matt to Karen, and even though she's deceased, to try to help cope. And he goes back to the very beginning of when he just started being Daredevil, and he met her for the first time, and just how his life changed from there. And we get to kind of see a little bit of Daredevil through the years, through the eyes of Matt as he's narrating it and writing it out to Karen. And it's very bittersweet and heartfelt. And the way that it's written is just beautiful. Not to mention the art by Tim Sale is just beautiful. One of my favorite artists, just from reading this, it still has a very, even though this came out I think in like 2003 or something, it still has a very retro comic feel to it. And the watercolors, I believe he uses watercolors. I think that's what the style is, either watercolors or pastels. I don't exactly remember. But I'll show you here. It almost takes on a very old school Disney animation feel to it. So I'll show you guys like this page right here. That very much to me reminds me of like 101 Dalmatians, like, just old school Disney animation, hand-drawn, like, that's the sort of vibe that I get. And I think it, given the context of the story and the narration, the style and the colors and everything just work perfectly. And we end up with this just beautiful story of Daredevil, and, recounting his life with Karen Page before she dies, and just how she changed his life, and just how much she means to him, pretty much. And it's genuinely one of the most beautiful stories I've ever read. It's fantastic. So this is chronologically the last one that you read out of the three, because Karen does die in the Kevin Smith run, I believe. Kevin Smith is the guy that wrote the story where Daredevil or Bullseye kills Karen. Yeah, anyways, this is, like I said, I'll say it again, I've said it how many times, this is one of the best things I've ever read. So that being said, that's sort of my little, I guess, Daredevil reading order. If you're first starting with Daredevil, I highly recommend you, regardless of, you know, how much you're gonna read of it, just start with this, The Man Without Fear. That gives you, you know, a good idea of the character and sets up a lot of pieces for the Daredevil mythos. Then, of course, you can read the full Daredevil runs between these big parts, because there is a lot of content that takes place between them. But if you don't want to read like a chunk of comics, you can just you know, read these pillars of stories throughout the Daredevil mythos and sort of fill in the gaps there. But if you're going to read just the big stories from Daredevil, this is the one that you would read next. And of course, this is still written by Frank Miller. Both the first two are written by Frank Miller. Of course, his introduction on Daredevil changed the game, changed the story. So I still haven't read the full like Frank Miller run of Daredevil, though I want to. So there's like plenty of content between those two that you can check out. And then here, Daredevil Yellow. This takes place after all of, I believe, the Marvel Knights stuff is what they call it. So this takes place after the Kevin Smith run, possibly even after the Brubaker run. I'm not 100% sure. But there's tons of amazing content in between these that you can read. But if you want to just read these on their own, you can definitely do that as well. And, you know, if you're going to read any Daredevil, like, these are the three to read, and especially I think Daredevil Yellow, because it's just fantastic. And before I end this video, guys, I do want to show you guys what I mean when I do say that I plan on getting into more Daredevil. I don't really do comic hauls anymore. I haven't really done that in a long time, so there's plenty of trades and stuff that I've picked up off camera and haven't shown off to you guys. So I thought maybe this would be a good time to show you guys, yeah, this year I'm definitely going to be getting into more Daredevil. The first thing I did get, I got the Epic Collection #1 for the Bendis run. So I'm going to be starting this at some point, either late this spring, we're already in the middle of spring, but probably early summer. I'm going to be getting into the Bendis run. So that's Epic Collection #1. I do have Epic Collection #2, as well as Epic Collection #3. Yeah, so this has everything from the Bendis run, just 3 modern era Epic Collections right here. And then I did find an awesome sale, and I took it upon myself to get some omnibuses. I did get the Chip Zdarsky Daredevil Omnibus #1. This is a more modern Daredevil that has some awesome moments. So yeah, I don't want to look through it too much as to not get spoiled, but there's some awesome stuff that happens in this run with Marco Cicchetto, who is on Ultimate Spider-Man as well, and his art is just fantastic. So very excited to read this. I'm going to be getting to this during the summer as well, hopefully. But I have Volume 1 as well as Volume 2, so I have both omnibuses here. So yeah, I have tons and tons of Daredevil content to get through this summer, and I can't wait. And hopefully I'll do reviews on everything and fill you guys in on my Daredevil reading journey. One of the main superheroes that from Marvel, and just in general, that I'm wanting to read at the moment. But anyways, guys, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Be sure to let me know in the comments what you guys think of Daredevil, what you guys have thought about the show if you've been watching it, or some of your favorite Daredevil stories, or any recommendations. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I would greatly appreciate the conversation. And if you want to take the conversation elsewhere and have maybe a little bit of deeper conversation about other comics and whatnot outside of the YouTube comments, the link to our official Discord server will be in the description as well, if you guys want to check that out. Also, greatly appreciate that. And yeah, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.